Welcome, everybody. Live from Chicago, this is Juan Soto, and this is our monthly SQL Server with Access Group. Joining me tonight, we have one of my better friends in Access, Luke Chung from FMS Software. He's going to be my special guest tonight and promises to be a great interview. And one of the things about Luke is he's the founder of FMS Software. Lucy is going to put a link into the chat so you can browse to the website. Luke is the one that introduced me to a number of things in Access. First for me, he was the one that first introduced me to PAUG, which is PAUG.com, is the Portland Access User Group meeting that we have every May. And what's interesting about that meeting, it sells out every January. First week of January, it sells out completely from people who attend worldwide. So if you're interested in going next May, I strongly suggest that you book your spot early in January 1st, actually, because it does sell quickly. And Luke was the first one that got me involved with that, and he's also a mentor for me. He's the one that showed me the way how to start a multinational consulting practice in Microsoft Access. And so we're proud to have him. So everybody, Luke Chung.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Juan.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So, Luke, we've this has been certainly an interesting year for Access, and one of the things that we've done is that we've seen some improvements to the program lately. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. What have you thought about the recent improvements with the bug fixes for the query designer and the alphabetical list of properties?
Well, I mean, the nice thing is that the Microsoft Office team has rededicated themselves to improving products on the Windows desktop after going through a few years thinking that everything was going to be web.
Yeah, it is certainly a breath of fresh air after many years of ho-hum improvements. And so we're going to be talking about that. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to skirt up to the NDA line without crossing it. We're going to just barely touch the line when it comes to the NDA, because both Luke and I have been invited, as we do every year, to come meet with the Microsoft team in Redmond in November. And so we're privy to things before the meeting, at the meeting, and afterwards throughout the year. And so we're going to be talking more about Access and what's coming as much as we can. I'd like to share as much as we can with you guys. But first, I wanted to ask you, Luke, how did you first get started with Access?
Boy, that was a long time ago. So, I've had my business now for 30 years, and Access has been around. So we started in 1986, and Access debuted in 1992. So prior to Access coming out, we were a database firm that was a partner of Borland in their DOS product days, Paradox, which was a desktop database. And I'd created a business building third-party products for that platform, probably among the top 4 or 5 vendors in that space, back in a period of time that Microsoft didn't have any database products. Fast forward to 1992, when Windows 3.1 was gaining traction. That's when they debuted Microsoft Access at Comdex, and I was actually at the event where Bill Gates showed off Access for the very first time. And at
that must have been really exciting.
Yes, that was exciting, although it was very confusing because a few months prior to that, Borland had purchased Ashton Tate. So Borland had purchased DBase, which was owned by Ashton Tate. So between DBase and Paradox, they probably had 80+% market share of the desktop database market. And Microsoft was not known to be a database company. I mean, they didn't own SQL Server at the time. They were more of a Excel, Word, and C++ company. So
yeah, I think a lot of the Access developers like myself also start with Paradox and DBase, mostly Paradox for DOS and then Paradox for Windows, and that's why I made my transition over to Access.
Right. Well, now of course, when you say us, that means that we were alive and adults back at that period of time. Lots of people now in the industry, weren't even born yet. So,
Well, okay, we're dating ourselves here. That's just wonderful. As if the receding hairline wasn't an indication enough of how old we are.
right. So that was an interesting time, and then we saw that transition over from DOS to Windows, and we were lucky to be there to see that. And I was also very close to the Borland management team at the time, and saw how they were not aware of the tidal wave that was going to hit them. So I literally was with the president and CEO of Borland at that Comdex event, where they just told me they weren't worried about Microsoft or Access, which scared me to death and made me make sure that our company was hedging our bets to, have a presence in the Access market.
Wow, and really, it's I get a lot of the promotional material say, "Well, the number one desktop database in the world." Yeah, because it comes with Office. That's why it's the number one. And so it was a brute force application of Access in the corporate environment that really did in DBase and Borland and Paradox.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, those DOS products never made the transition properly over to Windows. And so from the user experience of the solution, Access became the default database application to go to if you wanted to build a Windows solution.
One of the things that I remember during those heady days is a product called Superbase. I don't know if you heard of that or not. Back then, it made a big splash for me, and it was a Windows product. And I was as a Paradox for DOS developer, and I had no idea what the objects were and properties. It was like Chinese for me, and I really made it was difficult to me to make the transition over. But I never know what happened in Superbase. I was wondering if you heard about that or not.
No, I don't know whatever happened to that. Microsoft bought RBase and took some of that query technology and embedded it into Access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So we got quite a crowd tonight. Dan, welcome everybody. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat there. We're going to get to all your questions tonight. One of the things that really makes a point for me in terms of Access is the fact that this POG conference sells out every year. And we get people there from as far away as Australia, Russia, Germany, and it's really encouraging to me to see. Granted, there's 40+ people, but the fact that we still remain strong after all these years with that conference is encouraging. But one of the things that I thought even is to put on a conference here in Chicago and then open it up to unlimited. But it does take a lot of effort to put on a conference, bringing people in, put up the money for it, and not sure if it's going to work out or not.
Yeah, running an event or a conference is a whole different skill set. And we're lucky that the volunteers in the Portland Access User Group meeting continue to do that year to year. They get a nice turnout, and the venue that they've chosen is limited in how many people they can support. So that's why it sells out so quickly.
Very good. So, we've gone through a lot of phases with Access Web Apps lately. It started at 2010, I believe, and then we had another version 1.0. I called it in 2013, and we still have it here in 2016. But what are your predictions for Access Web Apps? Where do you see that going?
Well, the way they didn't make much of a change between 2013 and 2016. Access Web Apps are basically hosted in an in a SQL Server, in a SharePoint environment that's part of Office 365. So it allows one to create a very basic list and share it with other people to address one of the challenges that the Access desktop has, which is distributing solutions to users, database plus making sure people have Access installed on their machine. So that's, of course, the advantage of any web solution, is that people don't need to install things locally, and they can use it on multiple platforms as long as they have a browser, whether it's a Windows platform, Mac platform, and so on. So in very limited ways, one can use Access web apps to create browser-based solutions. But it's not as rich an environment as one would expect in the Access desktop and VBA, which has obviously gone through decades of enhancements and maturity. So one can't make the same kind of solution in terms of automation on the Access web apps as one can on the desktop.
Well, I for one have never done any mission line of business applications for it, because I just felt that it wouldn't do it justice for my clients, or wouldn't be able to be robust enough to work in enterprise. I wonder if you've had that same experience, or have you created apps like that?
We haven't really created enterprise apps with it. However, if people are using SharePoint Lists to keep track of things, this is an enhancement on top of that. So one really shouldn't compare it to a full-blown application that one would expect on a Windows solution. But if you were using SharePoint Lists, it's essentially one long list, and not very robust in that, relational kind of links and such that Access web apps can handle. Because Access web apps are actually, even though the browser is hosted in SharePoint, the data is in SQL Server. And that opens up some possibilities, which include a hybrid environment where you could have an Access desktop Windows-based database linked to the same tables that the Access web app is using, so that one could imagine having more sophisticated reports or data entry sessions designed there, while the browser-based solution is more of a data dissemination, sharing across multiple people with limited editing features. So there are ways to use both.
Well, one of the factors that impressed me is you've done quite an amount of web work in the past, and you even developed a intelligence tool that allowed agencies to link terror suspects from one group to another. Remember, it's that tool that you demoed to us that has those lines to different people, right. And right. It looked like a star configuration. You can drill down from one group to the next. I thought that was really impressive. What language did you use for that?
Right. Well, that's our Sentinel visualizer program, and that's a .NET application, a Windows-based .NET application on a SQL Server database.
Okay.
And it's used to find hidden relationships between people, places, and events.
Yeah, I was quite taken aback with it. And there you go, Sentinel Visualizer Program. Lucas just typed it into the comments there, so you guys want to check it out. Right. Just some fascinating technology.
Right. So that got us into the whole law enforcement, counterterrorism space. It's totally unrelated to Access, but it is an important part of our business. And we're doing things all around the world with that to essentially take data that one normally sees in rows and columns and showing it in a hierarchical link analysis diagram.
Well, one of the things you've been involved lately is in the security, and that security model is you were invited to United Nations just before the attack on the French in Paris for the French terrorists. And I remember I think you were there, or you were just coming back from there, or you were there?
Oh yeah, that was I was there the weekend right after the Paris bombings. So this was a conference in Vienna, Austria, in November of last year, or October of last year, and it was with the UN Office of Drug and Crime, which is the group that deals with what they call violent extremists, because in the UN world, you're not a state unless you're a recognized country, so they view terrorists not as war people, which requires a country, but as criminals. And one could argue lots of issues of whether they're criminals or not. I mean, I would agree they're criminals.
Yeah.
And then the whole issue of, how to combat that, right? Both from a from a military perspective, from a technology perspective, from an education perspective, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating. I was very honored to be one of the speakers to speak at that event.
And, I know you're also a board member in the Board of Education at close to in Virginia, aren't you?
Yeah. So I serve on I live in and work in Fairfax County, which is just outside Washington, D.C. And I've been appointed by the school board to be on an IT governance board for our county. So our county is the biggest county in Virginia and is very progressive in terms of the technology that they've deployed to run municipal services. So whether it's first responders, police, fire, to taking care of kids, law enforcement, healthcare, dealing with health issues, and child poverty and poverty in general, and housing. I mean, it's just been fascinating to see all the various aspects of technology that's used nowadays to run an organization and run a county government. I mean, it's hundreds of millions of dollars, and people now expect their local governments to be a 24/7 operation with things on the web and geospatial things for their land use stuff and tax plans and tax administration and cars and all sorts of things. And there are opportunities for government to be able to deploy technology in order to save money by reducing headcounts and improving service by being more accurate, scaling, and doing more with less, essentially. So my role on this, the way the county is set up, is, I guess years ago, the Board of Supervisors decided they couldn't understand what the CTO was asking for. They're like, well, I don't know, is that worth $1 million? Is that worth $100 million? She comes in and asks for something. We have no idea what she wants. So they put together this governance committee of local people who are in the IT world that aren't employees of the county, to kind of vet and make sure that the things that are recommended make sense and prioritize properly. So I've been doing that for, this is my third term, so each term's about 3 years, so about 6 years I've been doing it, just started my third term.
So in this capacity that you have in advising the Board of Education, one of the things that really hurts us in terms of introducing the younger generation to Access is there is no formal program or college program you can go and graduate from Microsoft Access with. I mean, there's courses that you can take, but most kids go in and they get a degree in .NET or computer science, and and then so a lot of people get into the Access world via their current job, right? They stumble across Access, they learn it, and they like it, and they love it, and they become experts in that field. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about, introducing database concepts into the classroom?
Oh, I think databases should be in the classroom, and it's unfortunate that a lot of computer science now, certainly taught in the high school level, has just devolved down to non-data things such as Java and building UIs, which is probably great for young kids who think of computers as games or animation. I mean, not to say those are bad. Certainly, the skill sets of people who build videos and pictures and things like that are fantastic, and that should be encouraged. I think the whole database side of things is just something that young people don't think about, and frankly is very hard to teach. One of the challenges at a lot of the schools, whether it's public or private, is keeping teachers that are skilled in those areas and compensating them or treating them well so that they're not taken away by the private sector.
Yeah, it is something that it's contradictory. Right? You want to have great teachers, and they're great teachers in IT. They end up making more money in private industry. One of the things that I did meet when I was at the last MVP summit last year was I met an individual named Kevin Wang, who started an organization called Teals, and I'm putting that in the browser, in the comments, excuse me, it's called TealsK12.org. Now, Kevin used to be a Microsoft employee, and he started this organization in order to bring people like Luke, myself, Maria Barnes, into the classroom and teach classes early morning at a local high school before you start your day, 1, 2, or 3 times a week. And he started that program because he wanted to bring professionals back into the classroom and provide a sense to the kids. And he was doing so well, he decided to quit. So when he resigned, Satya Nadella found out about it, and Satya says, "Why are you resigning? Why don't you stay, and we will help fund your organization here at Microsoft?" So he ended up staying with Microsoft, and now Microsoft found it as one of these sponsors of his program. So if you're interested in giving back to the community, I strongly urge you to look into the Teals program. I pasted a link there, TealsK12.org, and you can look for a high school you can volunteer there and offer you. One of the things I do is I like to teach about binary skills. Not binary skills, but how to do computers think things in terms of ones and zeros. So I have a really interesting chat on that where it's called how to learn how the computers think and communicate with aliens, and I work the alien angle into that. So that perks them up real quick. But going back to the topic of Access, look, it's been a while. I personally admit it's been a while since I've been so excited about the existing team at Microsoft. We've seen a shift change in the managers and the people, and they have really demonstrated to me that they're willing to put in the time and effort to make it a better product. Several years ago, they gave up on the desktop version of Access and declared it a mature product, which you might as well say it's died on the vine because they weren't going to put any more effort. It was all the web apps. And now this new group has come in. They've realized that the desktop does have value. And yes, we are going to put effort into it. And they launched a user voice. And if you haven't heard about the user voice, Lucy, if you can put a link to that user voice, Microsoft Access user voice, just look for that. And they listened. They've actually gone on that website and told people that, we are going to consider that feature, or we are going to consider, or we're not going to consider that feature. Like there was an effort to bring ADPs back, and that's not coming back. Well, one of the things that came out of that website was the ability to import DBF files and link to DBF again, which was stripped out of Access. I think it was stripped out of 2013, right, Luke?
Which part was stripped out of it?
DBF, linking to DBF files was stripped out of Access 2013 or 2010?
Yeah, they stopped supporting linking to DBase file formats, which are the DBFs.
And now they've brought it back.
Let me ask you something. At the conferences that I've attended with Microsoft, they refer to Access as a toy on many, many, many occasions. Are they still doing that?
I honestly can't tell you that I've heard many Microsoft employees say that. How about you, Luke?
Well, I think that there is that sense that Access is a toy, and my contention to that, and certainly compared to SQL Server,
I know your contention. I'm just wondering about Microsoft.
Well, Microsoft is so large; they have lots of different issues. I just when things like that come up, the question would be, well, Access can do a lot more than Excel. So, if Access is a toy, then what do you think about Excel? And usually people have very high regard for Excel, but a spreadsheet is much less robust than.
But if you're going, again, it's not what you and I think, which we know, and my clients depend on it and all that. It's Microsoft pushing this concept that Access is a toy. I hear this from my son. I tried to explain to my son, who deals with these huge terabyte databases. Okay, I deal with a hospital. They don't have 1 billion nurses, right? and they depend on it. But is there any way, maybe at one of the MVP conferences, that you could try to tell Microsoft or find out why they refer to it as a toy? Not how you feel and I feel.
No, I mean, honestly, I haven't heard anybody at Microsoft, the Microsoft team, refer to it as a toy. But,
well, certainly not in the Office team. I've heard things like that being insinuated from other places, in, quote, more sophisticated or more, advanced areas, whether it's the Visual Studio team or the SQL Server team. I mean, they look down upon it. Right? Because in comparison to what they're doing, it is a toy. But, what people lose context of is that Access is part of Office. And Office, goes to 1 billion people. Well, how many people can use .NET and SQL Server? I mean, that's got to be in the low millions. And we can't expect...
Not just that.
We can't expect...
Not just that.
Well, but we can't expect everybody to be able to, devote their lives to being a professional developer in order to create a simple database to not have to use Excel as a database.
That's not the only thing. If you're a small business, you don't have a need for a database that has 1 terabyte of data.
Right.
I mean, I have a client with 300,000 records, and that's a fair amount, 400,000, whatever they're up to these days. But they're never going to need, 1 terabyte, an instant access and all the new software and the MongoDB. I mean, they're just not going to need all that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that Access isn't very valid for companies. And I've also indicated that it's excellent for prototyping. Even if you can have a very large system, it's much better than writing specs. Nobody reads them. And look, you gave the best illustration years ago about what it takes for a company to purchase Oracle, SQL Server, and Access.
Right. So, I mean, it comes
down
to
that slide.
Right. Well, it comes down to cost, and it really comes down to how valuable is the solution that you're trying to build. Right. So if you're building something for, the back office of a bank to handle credit card transactions, well, you got to have something that can, handle millions of, transactions.
Exactly.
And you've got to make sure you don't lose a single one. Right. Because if you lose a single one, you could go out of business. Well, we were
the first one to tell you not to use Access, right? For that.
Right. So that's a completely different business solution, and it's something that an organization would spend tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to do right. Okay, so that's fine. So Access can't play in that market. Well, then, how do you work your way down to, smaller solutions that aren't worth that? Say the problem is only worth, with SQL Server, with Oracle, with .NET. I mean, if you don't have $250,000 brought to the table, you're not going to get an application built in most organizations, right? And a lot of these ones.
What I'm saying is that it's like saying comparing a car to a railroad. Okay, you don't often need to take have a train full of people. A car can do quite adequate a job, and nobody says a car is a toy.
Yeah. Well,
it serves a need.
I think what you need to. I think the organization at Microsoft has realized. I'll give you a great example of this. Recently, the Microsoft organization released a series of videos on how to use Access. And
where? Can you put a link to that on the
we'll put a link onto that. We'll see if we can get a link to videos that were recently released. Here. But what happened was that there was a real need to create these videos. And there was this meeting at Microsoft, and one of the top honcho for Office, who oversees all of Office, found out that they were creating these videos. And his first question is, why are we creating videos for Access? Why are we creating SharePoint? Because there's a lot of money involved. When they create these videos, there's teams of people and resources and camera and editing, and it's a big production. So Microsoft now is a data-driven organization. And so the response back to that vice president was that the data showed by an overwhelming majority that people want videos on Access. They don't want it on SharePoint. They don't want it on .NET. They don't want it on Word. It was Access. So they created these videos in Access. Lucy, I think if you search
if you can't get it now, you can email. Yeah, you can email it. I don't mean to,
but look, that's a great example of how Microsoft is turning into a data-driven organization with Satya Nadella. Right? It's not a feely kind of a thing. I tell you right now, if they had data that pointed to a non-use of access, they would kill the product. But that's not the case. The other way is true. The other trend is true. There's more people interested than ever in learning how to use the product, and so they justify creating these videos in order to do that. I think if you look at the official Access blog, you'll see
a link to that. I'll pull it up. I'm in the process of pulling it up. I'll get it for you.
Great. And so, I have another story to tell you. One of my sons, I have two sons. He was in college back then. Comes home and says to me, "Dad, one of my friends says that Access is Mickey Mouse." And
that's right.
And he says the .NET is the way to go. He's a programmer friend of mine. I says, "Well, son, does your friend drive a Cadillac like I do? No. Does he go on vacations around the world like I do? No. Does he make six figures like I do? No. Well, I would think that what I do is just as important as .NET because I'm making a great living out of it."
Yes. Well, the thing is, it serves. Look, all right. I have clients, even Metro North. Okay, that's not a kind of a tiny company, but there are little pockets of areas where Access is a good solution. But my concern is not that we know it, but that Microsoft starts to accept this. And that's I think, been the problem for a while, is that if people at Microsoft don't think it's a good idea, right?
Well, Microsoft has lots of different groups and lots of different divisions. And frankly, for the people out in the field that are meeting customers, they don't sell Access individually. Access is part of the Office bundle. Right? And there's so many products inside the Office bundle that Access is just one of many. And these people don't have the technical skills to know anything about them individually. Nothing against them. There's just so many. And I think for many Access people or people who are even in the industry full time, it's hard to know, all these new apps that they keep adding.
Hey, I'd like to, can I jump in here and render a thought? I mean, because I know exactly what this gal is talking about when she says she's run into Microsoft people that are talking Access down. Those are SQL Server and .NET people whose job it is to sell stuff for Microsoft. Microsoft makes, and all the offshoots of Microsoft and all the consultings and all the strategic partners make vastly more money pushing .NET solutions than they do pushing an Access solution. There's no money. It's as simple as that. But anybody that says Access is a toy, they really don't know what they're talking about. As a front-end platform, Access it's a killer application. I mean, we can develop something in Access for $50,000. You could easily spend $2 million in developing in .NET. It depends on the application. There's some things where you need .NET. And the other thing on this subject is you got to distinguish between the front end and the back end. I mean, I developed an application. Yeah, I developed an application where I work. I've got over 100 users on the thing, and they tell you can't use more than 10 with Access. We had over 100 users, and we got to the point where, I mean, there were so many things we had to do to keep it stable that we realized we're better off moving it into SQL Server. So we migrated the back end into SQL Server. But our front end is still, and I mean, it is really a killer application that just a couple of us developed here where I work. And if we had hired some group to come and build that for us, we would have spent over $1 million. But we did it because Access is just as a front-end development platform. Access, it's a killer application.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a paper on that with regards to the number of users that Access can support. And that's one of the biggest fallacies, that, it can only support 10 or 20. I mean, the Jet database engine can support up to 255 simultaneous connections. We've done it with people in groups of, with 100 simultaneous connections, which means you can support, a team of 1,000 people because not everybody's using the application at the same time.
And you can develop your application so much more quickly. I mean, try to take the same solution and do it in .NET, and all of a sudden it becomes a federal case. I mean, if you know what you're doing, you can develop front-end applications in Access very, very quick. I think faster than anything else.
We know that. No, obviously we know that. Now, I understand your point that they make more money selling SQL. However, if they would sell Access and indicate that you could prototype before you go to a $1 million system like SQL, okay, they'd make more money and they'd do better. Also, you know, they sell to what I used to say, they like to sell to the top 500 companies. Okay, how many companies are there in the top 500, right? How many small businesses are there, right?
Yeah.
And if they started to think about it in those terms, maybe they would be, you know, a little more understanding about, right?
Yeah.
But Microsoft's been talking about the demise of Access for I think about 15 years now that I've seen it.
I know.
And they keep pushing it out there, and they keep making enhancements with every release of Office. They add a couple nifty things to Access. So it's like, you know, who's kidding who?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they haven't outright, at least in the years I've been doing this, say they're going to kill Access. What they've done is saying we're not going to improve the desktop, but that's changed this year. So that's what encouraged me with this existing team, that they get it. They finally come around to getting it. And in previous interactions I've had, it was all about the IW, information worker. And I hear less of that now in the conversations I'm having with both the Access team and Microsoft in general.
I think one of the ways that I've communicated this issue with people that are skeptical about Access is I use a military analogy, right? You know, the U.S. has the strongest fighting force in the world. We have all sorts of weapons at our general's disposal. But when you're fighting a battle, you pick the right weapon for the right problem, right? And so just because you have nukes, and nukes can solve a lot of problems, doesn't mean that's what you should bring in to a street fight, right? I mean, there's a place for nukes, there's a place for planes, there's a place for tanks, there's a place for artillery, there's a place for bullets. We're not in the, you know, Access is the infantryman of the database battlefield. It's not supposed to run everything, but, you know, if you can solve things with a bullet and grenade, boy, that's a lot cheaper and has a lot less collateral damage than, you know, going through and using a tank to run over things or to level the whole city. So you just have to pick and choose the right resources to the right problem at hand and come up with a solution that can be profitably done for that problem. So, you know, if an organization, every one of their weapons costs $250,000, right, they shouldn't be solving problems that are worth less than $250,000. Well,
no,
what does
that's a
that
very
mean?
good analogy, but does Microsoft understand it? Do the people, you know, selling, you know, solutions, do they understand? Because I think they could be more profitable if they started to actually sell small businesses on the concept of, okay, you don't want to invest $1 million in SQL Server. Why don't you start, see what your application looks like in Access, which you can do fairly inexpensively, and then, you know, you can say, you know what, we have a lot of data, now it's time to move to SQL Server.
You know, I think the challenge that Microsoft has had is they own, 90% of the Office market?
Yeah.
So there's very little space for them to sell more copies of Office. They've gone the subscription model, so they can sell the subscription, but once you get them on the subscription, you know, I would presume in most cases they don't know or care whether somebody got there for one product or another. It's just
what I'm saying is that Access could be an entry point for them to sell SQL Server, as opposed to Oracle, if they did it properly.
Right. Well, and especially now with SQL Azure, you know, with SQL Azure out there where you can get SQL Server for $5 a month. There should be lots of opportunities. I think Microsoft's moving in that direction so that the Access desktop can take advantage of these cloud offerings in a more integrated way.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to mention here is Well, a lot of my clients, I've upgraded to SQL Server Express. I'm automatically, like if somebody calls me up here and says, we got 6 users, bam, we're going to go to SQL Server Express. And I clearly explain this to them and says, look, it's more reliable, it's more secure for your data, and you're not going to have issues with corruption of data like you would have with an Access backend. And so these people that have upgraded over the years to SQL Express, hardly, maybe one or two in one hand, I can count on one hand, that moved on to a full license of a SQL Server Standard Edition. All the rest are still on SQL Server Express. Mm-hmm. And so it's really nice to see that. But, in terms of making that story where, we'll upgrade you to a full license of SQL Server. And, the thing is, the SQL Server Express is free. Then you got to spend $12,000 to go on SQL Server Standard, or, like Luke mentioned, go to Azure. And do it in Azure, which is a lot cheaper, at least, than buying the standard version. And that's another, that's another thing. A lot of people, we're experts in Luke and I are both experts in what I call web enabling access, where we move the data to the cloud. You're still using a front end, and at the end of that cloud, there's a lot of challenges involved with that. And Luke and I know how to get around those barriers and be able to optimize access to work that way. But one of the things that I've noticed is that people say, well, I don't want my data in the cloud. And, I laugh at that when they say, oh, I want my data on my network, and I don't want it in the cloud. And I say, I laugh internally. I don't laugh at their face, I laugh internally. I ask them, well, are you connected to the internet right now? Is your network connected to the internet? Yes. Well, guess what? You're in the cloud.
Right.
Okay? Because I can go out there right now and I can pay $30 to somebody and get everything about you: your social security number, your wife's name, the name of your pet, what high school you attended, the grades you had in college. Your data's in the cloud now. There's nothing you can stop about it.
Right.
And so the fact is that I tell them, says, look, if you have a fire or theft, somebody breaks into your office, steals your server, or you have a mechanical breakdown, you're going to be down. Can you afford to be down a day or two in those scenarios? They say no. I said, then you need to be on the cloud.
Right.
And so,
one way or other you have to be. Yes.
Yeah. Now,
I'm going to push you back a little on that, Ron. I mean, there are certain things where that would fit. In other cases, it doesn't. And I think Access offers some features that you lose when you push the back end into SQL Server, right? Access was designed for a network file-based system. So one of the things that one needs to be aware of when one upsizes an Access database to SQL Server is what features do you lose? And the one thing that we find particularly troubling, and our clients find troubling, is the lack of automatic updates of data, right? So if the backend database is a JET database, an MDB or ACCDB, and you're looking at a view of a data sheet, a grid, and someone changes a record in that grid on another machine, it's automatically updated on your screen. If the backend is in an Access database. In SQL Server, that doesn't happen because it's a static view, and you wouldn't get an update until you refreshed your screen.
Right.
And in some cases, that's important to people.
Yeah, it is. It is, especially as you know with auto numbers. With Access backend, you get an auto number right away, and with Server, you don't.
Right. So that's a design issue, but that's less of an issue because that's when you're adding a new record. But if you've got a grid that you're looking at and you're expecting the data to change, and it changes, fairly infrequently, then you want to see that update as soon as it happens, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, when we issue a refresh on a SQL Server database backend, there's always a challenge of making sure you see the same data you did before, or the grid changed, or, the sort order changed, or whatever. Those are all things that you have to worry about that is completely free if the backend database is Access.
Okay.
Yeah, look, there are pros and cons to everything, but again,
Right.
it's, Access has its uses. Having SQL servers, the back end with Access as a front end has its uses.
Right.
I did develop with the Access system on the web, and it was actually demoed. I worked with George Hepworth on it, and it was demoed at the MPP conference. And I understand most people were astounded that we could get the damn thing to work at all. It's crummy. I mean, the screens are horrible. The application I did it for happened to I won't go into it now, but it made sense for that application. But by and large, it's depends on what you need. Everything, I have this discussion mostly with a lot of people. It depends is the answer to just about every single question you're ever going to get, right?
Yeah. All right. So, one of the things that I want to do here, we can wrap this up. One of the things I want to do is talk about the future of access.
Yes.
And so, one of the things that I visit this topic a lot when I speak at conferences, and the future of access is what we make of it, is what I like to propose. We have a lot of brilliant people working in this space, such as Luke with his products, and we developed a lot of techniques, and we blogged about them extensively. And then we want to make sure that people understand, look, we need to put a concerted effort in developing the technology, pushing the envelope, and being able to bring of our own selves into the product. So I still think that Access has a future. I see it in my sales. I don't see a dip in my sales like I would see if a product was diminishing. I mean, do I have dips in my sales? Yeah, for the summer I was hurting a little bit because people were out there on vacation, and the last thing they want to do was sign my proposal.
Sure.
But I see also for Christmas and holidays, I also see a dip. But I'm confident that I'll have a business for many more years to come. I wanted to get your feedback, Luke, on this future of Access.
Well, I always look at it from the perspective of the solution that needs to be created, right? So people have a need to be able to build solutions beyond the capability of Excel, right? Lots of people can build their own solutions in Excel, and that works great, but it takes them up to a certain limit. And they're not at the point where they want to invest in a full-blown application that would require hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's a gap in between there. And I think Access fits that gap of solutions that are valued probably within the 10,000 to 100,000 range is probably its sweet spot. Probably 50,000 would be its sweet spot. And so if that's the kind of budget, then Access can offer a lot of value in that space. But let me take it back. There are certain problems that are only worth $50,000, right? Nice. We're building a new, sales team incentive program that is, based on this, that, or the other, all sorts of funny calculations that a spreadsheet can't handle. And, you can invest a certain amount of time and effort to do that. This is not a mission-critical app. It doesn't have to be totally perfect. We're going to just send our troops into that area, capture the hill, and move on, right? And they're just commandos. They're commandos. They're not going to hold the hill. They just need to do their mission and move on. And we know there's going to be friendly fire, right? I mean, that's just what's going to happen. They're not all going to make it back. I mean, we're sorry about that, but that's okay, right? Totally different from a situation where we can't lose any data no matter what, because if we lose one debit or one credit, the whole bank is going to go out of business. I mean, it's a totally different kind of problem set. In the desktop world, in the Access world, in the Office world, I mean, people are losing spreadsheets every day. They forget to save or it disappeared somewhere. They don't know where the whole spreadsheet disappeared. But nobody loses their job. The business isn't at risk. And they can move forward. It's okay. That's a little friendly fire. We move on. That's where Access fits. Not that Access, should lose data. There are lots of things that, as the database becomes more and more valuable, you would want to invest more and more into system administrative things and backups and disaster recovery and all those kinds of things. But it doesn't mean that you need to invest in those things up front. There's a gradual level of investment one can make as one determines the value of the solution, right?
Yeah, well, I don't lose data. I tell my clients, I think of all of their, because, my clients don't want to lose clients either. I say it's like, I think of your clients as 5-carat diamonds. They're small, but you don't want to lose any of them.
Yeah.
Well, the fact is that, here's another analogy. Luke likes the war analogy a lot, but my analogy is until another technology can come by and kick Access butt in terms of the speed and reliability and the feature-rich that it offers, it's gonna be there for many years to come. .NET doesn't come close. We all know .NET takes twice as long and it's twice as expensive. Power Apps, which is something that you're going to be hearing a lot in the next 12 months from Microsoft, it's limited. It's web-based. And it's
Power
another...
Apps? What is Power Apps?
Power Apps, go to powerapps.com. I think that's what it is, right?
I think it's Power BI, powerbi.com.
No, Power Apps. Power
Apps. Okay, so then there's also Power Apps now.
Yeah.
Power Apps.
Can you guys
and how does that? How is that going to affect Access?
Well, it's a technology that's web-based that allows you to create these apps for the cell phone or tablet. And if you go to powerapps.com, you'll learn more about it. It's also they're just in the beginnings of that. And there's a link that Lucy posted for you, so you can click on it. It's supposed to be, it's not unlike Access Web Apps, but this has the whole might and power of the organization behind it. And it's web-based little applets that you can make. And I'm watching it closely because not only it has the potential to be huge, but because it has Satya Nadella behind it and the whole Microsoft organization. They're really pushing it hard. So I just want to give you guys a heads up on that.
No, that's good to know.
All right. So any other last questions before we go?
No.
I do have one quick question. In my metropolitan area, 10-15 years ago, we used to have Access User Groups.
I'm sorry, sir. Can I get your name? Can I get your name and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Paul Ponzelli. I work for the state of California with the Department of General Services.
Welcome.
We're in Sacramento, California.
Okay.
And we used to have Access User Groups in our area, as I said, 10 or 15 years ago. And you go to one of those meetings, and you might have 20 or 30 people in the meeting. And they were very animated, very excited, people sharing ideas. Right now, in my area, we have 0 Access User Groups. The group I used to go to dwindled from 30 down to 20, then to 10, then to 5, then 2 or 3 of us would show up and try to get excited about meeting with each other. And finally, it just went away, and that was very disheartening to me. Again, because I was saying earlier, we've got this application here in my agency where we've got over 100 users, and it works just fine. It's very valuable to us, and one of my partners here and I, we just developed it ourselves. But so I realized what a great application Access is and what you can do with it, but it's almost like the rest of the world is losing sight of it. And just one thing that keeps going through my mind is, remember back in the days when Apple came out with the GUI and there were the Macintosh computers, but most people weren't buying the Macintoshes. Most people were buying the dumb DOS-based PCs, even though the Mac was vastly better. And sometimes it takes the market perception a long time to get on board with something that's a good idea, and it isn't necessarily who has the best product. It's who does the best job of selling their product. And
well,
it took
was
Apple.
partially because all right, there are a lot of reasons for that. One of the things is that there were more applications for the Windows than one of the reasons we're using Access. My clients would love to go to Mac. I have to tell you, I'm not saying Mac is better, but Microsoft has a lot of issues that are not addressed properly, and they think if they go to a Mac it would be better, which it necessarily wouldn't, but that's how they think. But it's what you can do with it. In other words, the Mac doesn't let you just write applications for it, which possibly makes it a little more secure. In other words, you can't just throw something on it, right? Again, it depends. Everything. It depends.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're talking
but we
about
do
the
have, by the way, we do have an Access group in New York,
in Manhattan.
And we do get and I have to say I sometimes share your feeling. why is everybody showing up? But we've actually done a little analysis about it, and it turns out it's most of the reason that you don't have big groups anymore is you can get a lot more on the internet now. It used to be that people had to bring your problems to the group, and you really don't have to do that as much anymore.
Well, I just wanted to know, Rob, that that's why we started this organization, AccessUserGroups.org, and this is one of the many meetings we have throughout the month. Maria Barnes, who's on the line here, she heads up the lunch meetings. I encourage you to participate if you can. Thanks for coming today, by the way. Is this the first time you come to one of our meetings?
Yeah. I've been following you guys on the web silently, but I've been keeping my eye on you because I'm cheering you on. I mean, I want to see you guys make things happen.
All right. Anybody else would like to? Anybody else? Thank you, Rob. So, anybody else like to make a comment or have a question before we go?
Thank you.
I wanted to make a comment real quick. This is Jay.
Hey, Jay. Thanks for joining us. Jay McCormick from Chicago.
Yeah, I wound up on an airplane 2 months ago with a lady that I later found out in our conversation works on the Microsoft Access team in Microsoft.
Oh, wow. Wow.
In Mexico, okay.
What?
Where you said Microsoft Access team, where you said?
No, in the headquarters.
Oh, Redmond. Okay, great.
Yeah, in Redmond. And she goes, so what do you do for a career? I said, I'm a Microsoft Access programmer. And she goes, oh, like she was like given hope or something. Like she was a young gal. She goes, she's a young gal. She was she called herself a peon engineer. She was one of the lower level folks. But I just thought it was interesting irony.
That is amazing.
I randomly wound up next to this woman on a plane. It was just
amazing.
It was funny.
That's amazing.
And
hopefully you've done some good for the rest of us, because she'll go back and say, what do you mean people don't use it? I was on the plane and I met somebody who does use it.
Well, one of the team members has actually gone out to see one of my clients. I don't know if they've done the same thing with you, Luke, but they've come to Chicago and met with my clients using Access. So that's encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so any other comments or questions before we go? Thanks, Jay. Anybody else?
Nope. Thanks again.
All right. Well, my guest tonight has been Luke Chung with FMS Software. Please visit Luke's website, fmssoftware.com. If you're an Access developer,
that's fmsinc.com.
fmsinc.com.
Yep.
I just promoted him to FMS Software.
Perfectly.
And fmsinc.com. And if I use this product, full disclosure, I use this product, and they're great.
Yes.
It allows us to be more productive. If you haven't had a chance to do so, please try it. Please try them, and at least give them a try and see. I particularly love the one that allows to format my SQL code. You got a SQL string, and you got to append.
Right.
Yeah, there's a tool in there that allows you to do that automatically. I just love it. That's just enough. Just that enough was the cost of admission. I thought was really good, and it's just a small fraction of what these tools do. And I'd like to thank from the bottom of my heart for Luke to be agreeing to do this. This is the first time he's joined us. I hope it's not the last time. And looking forward to see him in Redmond next month.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Great to meet you.
This has been Juan out of Chicago. Please join us next month in November, where we'll have another one second Tuesday. We meet every second Tuesday at 6:30. And if you'd like to present on this group or present any other groups, either Maria's or other groups that we have, we're starting a Power Apps group soon, by the way, by Andy Tevez. I encourage you to check him out. And thank you so much, everybody. So long from Chicago. Have a great evening. Go Cubs.